Hello everybody and welcome back to Suzerain. So in the last episode, things kind of got a little bit testy between me and some of my advisors, in particular about the Reform Committee and so on and so forth, and that kind of deteriorated. And now we're going to meet with the Chief Justice of I was about to say the United States, good God, okay, but of Sortland. We're going to meet Justice Orso Hawker. Also, just a little slight thing though. Just a slight thing. I promise it's a slight thing. So, when the game first came out, I had to turn around. I was doing a live stream of it on Steam and on Twitch and on various other places and whatnot. And in order to do that, I had to turn around and basically start up a new game. So this is pretty much the same game. The only difference is in this particular one, I went ahead and changed from the I changed from the completely closed off immigration to being more relaxed on immigration. And just for the only reason why I did that is because I wanted to have a shot at trade with Agnolia, because we are going for a more authoritarian playthrough, but we are going for a more capitalist playthrough also. So I thought that might help because they are more favorable to open trade and stuff like that. And also in my spare time, I did manage to actually beat the game. I beat the game twice actually since it came out, and since I did have to go through and play and stuff like that. But I don't know what's going to happen on this particular playthrough. There might be some similar things that happen with some of my other choices that I played in my spare time. But other than that, it's still going to be completely blind to me. And I may even go ahead and let some of the choices be decided by you, the viewers. So we'll see. But anywho, yeah, that was the only thing that I changed. And I don't think it's going to be that gigantic of a change. And honestly, I think it's going to become a moot point here in a second, because I do know this event that's coming up here. Anywho, so again, Chief Justice, let's have that meeting with him, shall we? The administration has been working day and night on the overwhelming amount of issues that we're facing the country. The department sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a moment. Another long day. On top of all that, I finally managed to set up a meeting with the old guards to talk about a path of no reforms and cooperation. It was in 30 minutes. I was either going to cooperate with them or wouldn't have no choice but to work with the reformists on the new constitution. And I'm going to take a moment to relax. I stretched out my arms and looked out the window. Thousands of shimmering lights in the whole sword skyline were mesmerizing. Suddenly I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucien. Lucien Galad. Good evening, sir. Good evening, Lucien. Soon Mr. Hawker will be coming to the meeting with Mr. Garassi. Before they come, we should talk about our strategy, sir. Let me see. I aim to get a deal out of this meeting. We should be careful when dealing with the old guard, sir. And I know I told you this before, sir, but I wouldn't trust the Chief Justice. Duly noted, Lucien. I'll see about that myself. Of course, sir. We should... There were 3 knocks at the door. Lucien checked his watch. He looked rather worried. Livia opened the doors, and Chief Justice Orso Hawker and Judge Hamron Garassi entered the room. Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you. Evening. Welcome, Justice Garassi and Chief Justice Hawker. Good to see you indeed. Orso gestured at the sofa in the office. May I? Let's have a seat, gentlemen. We all took our seats on 2 opposite sofas and made ourselves comfortable. How were your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. Let me see. Don't want to seem weak and everything, since I am supposed to be strong about these things. Thank you. It's been very busy, but I'm doing good. It will only get busier, yet I think you're doing a good job so far, considering all that's happening around us, with the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our borders. He let out a deep sigh. It is a troubling time. We appreciate your concerns. You invited us here this evening to talk about a possible cooperation. So let us hear it from you. What do you have in mind, Mr. President? Let me see. We need to stay united in times of possible conflict, or I want to protect the current Constitution. I'll be a little bit vaguer right off the bat. We need to stay united in times of possible conflict. I agree. Sorlin is in a dire situation right now. We need to stay focused on our real problems. We will be honored to work together. Having said that, there are some things you need to be aware of. Yes, Mr. President, our national values and sovereignty are under attack. We must be vigilant and aggressive against these reformists. It's clear that their reforms are a conspiracy of foreign powers. Interesting. I've read the security reports. I'm suspecting something big too. It's not only something, Mr. President. The superpowers are playing chess in Swordland. Please let me explain. We have important information you may not have heard yet. With all due respect, how could a justice have better security intel than the president of Swordland? That's a good question. How? Maybe you should first see if your security team is worth trusting. Interesting. Please explain, Mr. Hawker. I have incriminating evidence against someone huge. But before I give you that, I've had a couple of questions on my mind. What do you think about the offensive posturing of Runeberg and their KA-74s being found in the hands of the Blue Separatists? Okay. Let's see. What do I really think about that? I mean, I don't want them to have that, obviously. Let me see. Blue Separatists must be dealt with before they gain the support of the Blues. Is the administration doing something about that? Well, not as fast as I'd like, honestly. It's not good enough, Mr. President. We need an increase on our security budgets. This is an actual emergency. It affects all of Swordland. I agree. Security will be improved. That's why I'm beefing up that military budget. It's great to hear. Are you also aware that the armed Blutish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Blutia? Let's see. We're going on a more authoritarian path. So, let me see. Everybody knows that, sure. You know what that means. Do you remember the vote of the Workers' Party in the last election? I see where this is going. Today, the only reason they are not in the assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They have gotten quite big, too. They are clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Blutish force cannot be denied. And all of a sudden, the reformers are trying to decrease the electoral threshold, so that the Blutish separatists can be legitimized in the assembly to achieve their aims of independence. That's why we cannot allow it, Mr. Hawker. I agree. Therefore, we need to work together. I wish the only issue were the Blutish terrorists in Runeberg. Now we have conflicts on the streets between the nationalists and the communists. All right, look, I'm a nationalist now. Come on now. I gotta defend them. Jeez. And the communists are gathering really fast after the shooting of Sarkos. This could potentially lead to civil war, Mr. President. We know that United Contana supports the communists in Swordland. Reformists suggest changes would also bring the communists, who are backed by United Contana, into the assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? Ah, boy. And what is your suggestion? We should take the necessary measures against communist and Blutish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflict with Runeberg. And of course, not fall into the traps of the reformers by listening to their demands. They're clearly plotting to weaken the president and our whole administration in order to exploit the situation. Which brings us to the information that I have about this important figure. Please explain, Mr. Hawker. The person in question is Franz Richter himself. I knew it. I knew the bastard was shady because of the whole Taurus holding things. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Arcasia. I mean, I knew that, so. Arcasia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amidst a chaotic period in Swordland. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. That is why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms and preserve the Constitution together with you. At least that's what we hope for. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Arcasia? Mr. Galad, we all know he has been in Arcasia many times because it's been documented. But what will you think if he has been making hidden flights to the country? Huh. He was hiding his flights to Arcasia? He was. He has been spotted in a hotel in Arcasia last year, where they held the Conference on Economic Development in Volatile Regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that our Constitution is the reason for everything bad. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe that he had a meeting with President Walker behind closed doors. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken in Arcasia in different cities. One is from a couple months back. Again, none of this is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Arcasian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too. How can any of these be undocumented? We don't know. Even if he used a private plane, we would be able to get the information of his flights. That means he has people helping him from the inside. Many Soulless were already following his lead for quite some time, Mr. President. I cannot give away their identities, but I can give you the evidence. He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordish border guard with highlighted dates that showed no trace of Friends Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken in the conference in Arcasia, as well as remarks by lesbian and Arcasian citizens who claimed to have seen him with Arcasian businessmen around the same dates. There were also an official transcript of one of his speeches where he claimed to be in Benfi on the dates of the conference in Arcasia where he was spotted. Lucien skimmed through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned into surprise. These seem to be real. Of course they're real, Mr. Galad. These seem to suggest that Arcasia is behind the reformists. Their demands will only benefit Arcasia. They want us to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Swordland. I bet Runeberg is part of the plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. Now you understand the reason of our current stance, and also our suspicion about your advisors, who clearly have not given you this vital information. Lucien gave him a sharp look. We appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away. We still need to check the information. There's not much to think or check. This is clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency. Interesting. You want me to declare an emergency? Of course. We cannot wait for the process of the Assembly to take care of these issues. You must exercise your presidential powers for a fast and effective solution, which means you might need to suspend parts of the Constitution to give more authority to our security forces to deal with these issues. We must officially investigate Mr. Richter as well. You can devise a strong security decree if you base it on Articles 57 and 58, which gives the President the right to suspend parts of the Constitution to deal with national security threats. You can directly bypass the Assembly in such a situation. The only thing you need is the Supreme Court to allow the emergency to be declared, and you have our word on that. Sir, I think that is going a bit too far. We shouldn't escalate things so fast. Oh, you have no idea how fast I want to escalate things. Mr. President, why don't we talk in private? Only the two of us. We can devise a plan together. I know how we can use the Constitution to our advantage. It would be more effective if Mr. Galad and Mr. Garasi leave the room before we discuss it. Lucien looked at me to hear my response. Could you leave us alone, Mr. Hawker, gentlemen? Lucien stood up as Orso gave him a smile. Haran paid his respects and left with Lucien, leaving me and Orso alone. So, Mr. President, if you stop the Reform Committee meetings immediately and focus on the real threats, I will guarantee you, we will manage the reformers together. You must eliminate these threats, both internal and external. An emergency act can help you do that. We cannot trust anyone in the administration either. I want the power. I don't trust Orso as far as I can throw him, but I really want the power. So, let me see. Tell me more about the legal details of an emergency act. According to Article 58, if public security and order are seriously disturbed or endangered within the Republic of Swordland, the President of Swordland may modify and suspend parts of the Constitution, subject to confirmation by the Supreme Court, to determine the validity of the declaration of a state of emergency. Which parts of the Constitution can we modify or suspend? That's kind of a gray area. The Constitution states that no state shall, in the case of national emergency, modify or suspend the rights of freedom defined in Article 100 of the Constitution, unless actually invaded or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. Such imminent danger. That can definitely be argued to be the case. Exactly. It can definitely be argued that we are under such imminent danger because of Runeberg. Not to mention United Cantana's support for a communist coup in Swordland, as well as Friends Richter's involvement with Arcasia, which is definitely connected to all of these problems. And of course, that is up to the Supreme Court to decide. So that is not a problem. Can't the Assembly simply revoke it? According to the Constitution, only the President and the Grand National Assembly can revoke the emergency after it's declared. That is correct. However, as long as your party is in line, they will never have a majority to revoke it immediately. So no, they cannot simply revoke it. How can we effectively silence the opposition? We may need increased surveillance on our political rivals to find out about their connections and plots. Bringing unlimited detention would allow you to arrest people as necessary, such as Mr. Richter. He needs to be eliminated. I'm going all the way. Screw it. I'm going completely full fascist. I agree. In an emergency, anything is possible, Mr. President. The Supreme Court will support your decisions. Okay, where do we begin? You must first justify the emergency act. We need to have at least one target that we can blame the conflict on. They will be declared as national security threats, and this will allow us to prosecute their members or people connected to them. There are obvious connections between the Blutish separatists and Runeberg, and the separatists have clear connections to the Workers' Party of Blutia. They should be declared a national security threat, and the party should be banned. Okay. Okay, I'm liking where this is going so far. These blue separatists have no place in Swordland. They will not be tolerated. Red Youth must also be our target. They are plotting a communist revolution in Swordland with clear funding from United Cantana, and now they took to the streets after the death of Bernard Sarkaz. There are already clashes and protests on the street which must be dealt with before it gets out of hand. You can also justify an action against the Young Swords. After all, they started all this mess with the commies, and they killed a man right near the Maroon Palace. They can be considered a declaration of war against the state itself. Okay. That's interesting, because I was thinking maybe I could turn around and work with the Young Swords. But I guess, screw it. I guess I could just go ahead and just label both of them as terrorists. Interesting. I guess I will. I think I will go ahead and label both of them as terrorist organizations. I don't know how I feel about the United Contana aspect, because Vosland is still up there, and that's going to be a gigantic pain in the ass. And then there's also Arcasia, who I want to work with. So, But yeah, I'll go ahead and label both of them as terrorists. They are both enemies of the state. But let's talk about how we can deal with them. We should eliminate the threats on our streets first. The police should have the authority to disperse crowds as necessary. We also have to keep the streets clean from the socialist thugs and brutish separatists. We should give more authority to the police regarding their use of force. They should be able to stop and frisk as necessary, especially in brutish neighborhoods. Okay, I agree with all that. That's fine. I can okay that. The police will also need permissions for increased surveillance against these organizations. They should be able to search properties without warrants, and wiretapping should be permissible beyond its current limits. They will also need to be able to act swiftly if a person is suspected of crimes against the national security of Swordland. The police should be able to detain them without trial. We cannot allow them proper trials anyway. Okay. I ain't got no problem with this. Keep going. Go ahead. There's also the external threats we must face. Brunberg has acted hostile in the past, and now they're arming the Bloods. We must cut all ties with them. They need to be embargoed. Their citizens must be barred from entering Swordland as well. We must erase all of their influence in Swordland, weaken their trade, and give them a message. Brunberg is our biggest enemy. We must react. And of course, we need to prepare our army in any case. They have a very powerful military, and they seem to have plans on our soil. Then there are the superpowers. Both are influencing our nation to be in their spheres. It seems Arcasia already bought Mr. Richter and possibly is behind all of this. And United Contana is funding Swordish communists against our state. But we cannot bow down to the superpowers. Swordland must stand tall. Oof. Honestly, I think we can't go against them. But we will not bow to them, Mr. Hawker. As long as you give me those powers, I'm not gonna do anything to Arcasia. I know we won't. They tried to divide Swordland before, but we came out stronger after the Civil War. And I salute Colonel Soul for that. May God preserve his soul. Orso looked at the clock in the office and then outside the window. Mr. President, I've taken too much of your time already. I will be reaching out again after you dissolve the Reform Committee and end the pursuits for reform. I will stop the reform shortly. Proceed with the deal. It's great to hear. He slowly got up from the sofa. It was great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to our cooperation, Mr. President. He shook hands on our deal. This also meant that I made an unholy alliance with the old guards. Have a good evening, Mr. Rain. Good evening, Mr. Hawker. He left the room. After he left, I called in Lucien and explained to him about my decision to stop the reforms and called Peter to dissolve the committee on the next day. This was a point of no return. Alright, so things are about to get a little shaky. About to get a little shaky around here. Oh, this is finna be interesting. I'm about to be a generalissimo. Hawker in the Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Orko Hawker has been spotted entering the Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of his visit that is happening right after the increased conversation around the so-called democratic reform. Historically, Mr. Hawker usually does not frequent the palace unless for official business, and this was certainly an unplanned visit. Clearly, there must be something he wants out of this. Our speculation is that this has something to do with the reforms. More to come on this later. Oh, you have no idea. And the L1 construction plan is started by Underhall. Underhall Construction has reported that the preparatory work for the L1 railway has already started, including clearing land and transporting equipment. Construction of the railway will be starting in the next months from Holsword. Okay. Well, let us proceed and see what we have next. Trials of Democracy. Interesting. Interesting indeed. Okay, I'm about to go full fascist. I didn't think I was going to go full fascist so soon. Alright, let's see what we have here. We have several reports here, and we have 5 newspaper articles. And we have here Barbecue with Frank. Interesting. Okay, I think I remember that from my other playthroughs. Alright, from Soylent today, school poisoning in Ribble. Police have arrested the principal of a high school in Ribble in southern Bergia, where 12 students died after eating a free meal laced with pesticide. The students, aged between 15 and 17, died after eating a lunch of local dish of zabla, cooked at the school in a poverty-stricken city. Police have started the investigation to solve the mystery of how the pesticide ended up in the food. Okay. And the Radical. Time for women to stand up. Women of Soylent have always been under pressure by the unequal society and the system of discrimination that was built by old men who only knew about war, said Katarina Horton in a women's rally that was held in Hosort yesterday. Swedish League of Women is organizing a number of rallies across Soylent to bring the change Soylent desperately needs. It is time for Soylent to realize that we have to respect every individual regardless of their sex and strive to become an advanced civilization. Women have long been pushed to the corners of the social and political life. To address this change, a new campaign was started all over Soylent to establish a framework for women's rights. Swedish League of Women is organizing rallies with the support from Minister of Education Sierra Walda and Member of Assembly Katarina Horton. Everybody is equal according to the Swedish Constitution, but there are no protections against discrimination, which only reinforces the inequality in practice, said Walda in a press conference. The movement must be supported by all Swedish women as well as men. We need to bring change now. We can do it. Questioning soulless education. The newly unveiled SIPA Education Performance Report unveiled a sad reality about Soylent's abysmal status in the comparison to many countries. Soylent was rated 39th out of the 68 nations that were assessed by the OMEC organization. The primary gauge of the quality of education is made from a sample of 16-year-olds from each nation and their capacity in fields like mathematics, history, chemistry, and many others. One of the key issues was seen as the strong focus on history and citizens classes, leaving little time for scientific fields. Minister Walda often mentioned the gaps in the system in her assembly debates before she joined the cabinet. This is also supported by one of our editors, a professor from Hosort State, who had long been critical of the situation in secondary education. The SIPA report reveals the damning truth that soulless education, based on the principles of statism, nationalism, republicanism, poisons the bright minds of our children. We need to rid this system from the poisoning that is ideological indoctrination and let our future generations think for themselves. The Economist. Upcoming government budget changes. As the top economy experts in the country, we have been watching the upcoming changes to the government budget very closely. President Anton Rein's first internal economical challenge lies ahead, and we will see if he can prove his capabilities as a leader who can think ahead. The potential ramifications of diverting the funding to certain governmental branches has always been a point of contention for any leader, and is no different for this case. We will see if President Rein can hold on to promises he has given during the election campaign. Yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting. Van Horten blames Volksland for the missing fishing vessel. On Tuesday morning, Agnolia's Prime Minister Van Horten has made a statement denouncing Volksland for the missing vessel. Hull number ARV-0238. Our dutiful Coast Guards have rescued a crew member of the missing vessel. Through his statement, we had learned the ship's unfortunate end was none other than Volksland Navy. However, the Prime Minister has refused to disclose the surviving crew member due to fear of an assassination attempt from Volksland to cover up their hostility, as the minister later claimed. Okay. Alrighty, so that is the news for right now. Let us read some of these reports that we have coming in. We'll start over in the west, and then we will head east From Narble. Narble report lack of hospitals. Mayor of Narble has reported that their hospitals are overburdened and they are unable to respond to the needs of the citizens. He complained about months-long wait lists for terminally ill patients. On top of the capacity issue, it was also noted that the facilities are still largely using 1920s technology. Well, that's not good. And from Lechaven, recession hits farmers again. As per the latest news from Lechaven, the farming industry has taken another hit as a result of the recession. There are reports that 16% of all wheat in Lechaven are rotting in barns from a lack of buyers. Farmers are requesting additional funds from the government to survive this year. Oh, that's not good. Let's see what we got down here in Bergia. Buddhist resistance in sanctuaries. Security units have arrested 3 priests at 2 different Nuridi sanctuaries in Sarna. After finding links to insurgent activities, the report came from an elderly man who wanted to pray in peace, but instead found himself invited to join the Buddhist Freedom Front by a state-sanctioned priest. Further incidents indicate that the BFF is pushing for a local recruitment drive in different sanctuaries across the region. Interesting. Okay, I didn't read the article, the thing about Nuridi here. It is apparently the majority religion here in this country, and it might be even bigger than that. Oh, it's the 3rd largest in the world from what I can see. But let's go ahead and go over that. Nuridi is a monotheistic religion teaching that the only creator is the divine God and that Saint Dast is the divine messenger. It is the biggest religion in Marcopa and the 3rd largest in the world. Nurists believe that the divine God revealed divine intent through Saint Dast on Dissension Day. As a divine messenger, Saint Dast began his lifelong journey of spreading the message of the divine across the land, together with his 30 disciples. According to Nuridi, the divine God is an entity believed to inhabit all things. Nurists believe that one must strive towards the construction of the Golconda, a divinely ordained pillar in the axis of life that will bring salvation to all human beings. Those who follow this goal are considered to be on the path of enlightenment. The 2 main branches of Nuridi are Destranuity and Ruhism. Destranists believe in the direct and literal following of the teachings of Saint Das. Ruhiches follow a more interpretive approach advocated by Saint Wurik, who they believe was divinely appointed as the successor to Saint Das. This is interesting. Okay, so it's kind of like a combination of Islam and Christianity to a certain degree, because there's the whole aspect of there's only the divine God, and that Saint Das is his divine messenger. And of course, if you know anything about Islam, you know Allah is God, and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger. So of course there's other prophets, but still interesting. I like that. Okay, I wonder if this is going to play a role later on. And there's different factions as well, similar to how you have the Sunni and the Shiite, but also similar in Christianity, how you have like the Roman Catholic Church, but then you have the evangelicals. Like here in the United States, you have evangelicals, you have Baptists, you have Methodists, you have televangelists, so on and so forth. So, you know, and I live in the South, so you throw a rock, you can find 50 churches. So it's just how it is, but interesting. Very, very interesting. Okay. Ruhism is one of the 2 main branches of Nuridi. It advocates Nurists to not only study the teaching of Saint Das, but also of all disciples. In particular, Saint Wurik, who they believe was divinely appointed as the successor to Saint Das. Ruhisis, I think that's how it's pronounced, I apologize if I'm butchering that, believe that without curiosity and skepticism, the construction of Golconda can never be achieved. According to Ruhis teachings, the expression of gratitude and bringing joy to others without any thought of compensation are the main methods of purifying one's mind. Instead of priests, Ruhisist sanctuaries often have a wisherer, a wise person, or a teacher. It also kind of reminds me of, I was reading the traitor Baru Cormorant. And in that series, they have, man, I can't remember what the first religion that you run into, but they have another one in there that's called Trim. And in Trim, there's no thought behind certain action. It's just about doing the right thing no matter what. So it's kind of like paying it forward. So it does become interesting because you just assume things are going to work right by doing good things. And it does become very interesting later on because you don't know if some things are divine or some things aren't divine. But yeah, that's pretty interesting. And what was the other denomination of Nurist? Let's see. Dastranuity is one of the two main branches of Nurity. It advocates a return to the tradition of the path of enlightenment and the strict following of the teachings of Saint Das, which they believe is the unadulterated pure form of Nurity. Practically, Dastranists ought to directly rely on the Saint Das teachings and the 11 pillars of Nurity. Also similar to Islam, how you have the 6 pillars. I think it is. I apologize if I'm butchering that. But yeah, they have their pillars as well. While ignoring the rest of the Nurist teachings. A key theme in Dastranist thought is the importance of avoiding impurity while ensuring purity. Dastranists perform rites of purification with the aid of priests in Dastranist sanctuaries. One of the holiest sites in Dastranist is the Ark Sanctuary of Dissension in Dare. That is a lot of D's. But yeah, it also is very similar to Islam too, because in when they talked about Wiricism or whatever it's called, there's the whole aspect of Wirik being the successor, and that's essentially the difference between Sunni and Shiite, if I'm not mistaken, is that it's basically boils down to who was the rightful, if you want to air quotation mark, the rightful heir to the Prophet Muhammad. So, and of course there are some theological things as well. But anyway, I'm not a theologian. Theologian, is that the term? Sure. Anywho, fictional politics. Communist books have been burned in Boren. Local residents gathered thousands of books that they claimed to be spreading communist and Melankevich propaganda at the Century Park in Boren, and set the books on fire. Aggressive slogans targeting the Red Youth and the Workers' Party of Bludia and the Communist Party of Sortland were shouted. Yeah, sure. Youth groups from the local party offices of the USP and NFP also joined in with the burning. The first department was dispatched and the protesters dispersed on their own. Interesting. Young Swords and NFP flags burned. A massive counter-protest against Young Swords led by a local politician known to be aligned with the Red Youth resulted in many injuries and property damage. Subsequently, the Young Swords and National Front Party flags were burnt, which caused tensions to escalate. Local police dispersed the protesters by sundown. Okay, and I think that is all the issues in the country right now, aside from just the general country burning and stuff like that. Okay. And I think we'll go ahead and do the barbecue with Frank, and then after that, I will call it a video after that. It was a Saturday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the Sarkis assassination. I lit the backyard grill. Monica and Dana were out shopping for craft supplies, and I'd given the staff the day off. It was just myself and Frank at home. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at the moment, but I did know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Frank glimpsed the grill and the meat, he stepped outside to join me. Let me see. Again, I said I wasn't going to be a jerk to my family, or at least I'm going to try not to. I can tell you right now, in my other playthroughs, it did not work out well. But in that one, I was just fully being a douche, trying to see how far I can go. I will say, it can turn rather poorly. So, come to spend some time with your old man, have you? Sure, if you can spare a few minutes out of your busy schedule. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been around very often lately, but I'm happy to see you now. It's okay. I know you've got the most stressful job in the country, and you've got to feed your family on top of it all. We both chuckled. I turned to tend to the fire. Here, let me try. He grabbed the fan and started quickly waving it over the coals. The fire roared to life. He turned to look at me with a grin on his face, as if he was expecting praise. Let me see. I'm just gonna say nothing. No, I'm not gonna be a jerk again. Not bad, son. Not bad. Thank you, sir. It is in our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. The grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. That was a spot-on impersonation of Lucian. We looked at each other for a second, then burst out laughing. I realized my throat was parched. There was a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. Why don't you bring us a couple of beers? I don't endorse this in any form or fashion. Do not let your kids drink. But, there you go. He looked at me in disbelief. You mean I can... But Mom told me... He stopped himself, quickly ran inside, and returned with 2 beers. We cracked them open, clinked the bottles, and gazed out at the city skyline. For a moment, my thoughts flashed back to my childhood and my relationship with my own father. My father was a rich man. We never had to worry about food, clothes, or anything else, yet he was nearly always away and constantly distracted on the rare occasion when he was at home. Now that I was the president, I was worried that I would end up just like my father, distant and absent from Frank's life. Dad, can I ask you something? Wait for him to think about what to say. It's just, I feel like there's so much you've been hiding from me. About your past and about what's going on right now. Like at dinner that night after the ball. You told me everything was under control, but it wasn't, was it? I know what happened in the 20s. We learned all about it in school. Now with the protests and the riots, it's going to be the same thing. Dad, is there going to be a civil war in Swordland? Ooh, the heavy stuff. I'll be honest with him. I hope not. He let out a sigh. But what was it like back then? Uncle Peter said the 2 of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore. You can tell me. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing towards me and my friends, weapons drawn, of people I knew, friends and neighbors, being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways. The shock and grief on the faces of fathers, mothers, and orphaned children. Those were dark times. It seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man, so let's talk about it. Frank leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide. Tell him about the coup of 1927. I was barely older than you are now, studying economics at the Lechavan Business School. I was a freshman, excited and young. I had just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized they were military camouflage tanks carrying hundreds of soldiers. The same soldiers that were supposed to protect Swordland's citizens pointed their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked what was going on and was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered in protest. Frank kept listening, a shocked look on his face. Well, I did say I was going to be honest with him, so. Seeing the crowd gathering, I knew something was going to happen. Something bad. I decided that it was impossible to go against armed men and ran away from the scene. Ran away from my friends who were getting arrested and shot to save my own dear life like a coward. I still feel my flight was shameful. I should have stood my ground. No one could sleep that night because of gunshots and sounds of boots. I can't forget the screams to this day. Frank leaned back in his chair. His shoulders slumped heavily. It was time to tell him about the Civil War. It was right after I met your mother. We had both joined the same political debate group to push for change after the coup of 27. Eventually, I became convinced I wasn't doing enough, so I joined the Young Swords. Then, one night, it happened. 2 different factions in the army, one of them led by fascist General Lutheran and the other by socialist General Ricard, started fighting against each other. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Frank shifted in his seat, visibly uncomfortable. So we organized a protest one day against Ricard. We were fed up with the army toying with the country again. Tell him I ran away. I paused for a moment before continuing. Soldiers were waiting for us. I knew something was going to happen, something bad. I decided that it was impossible to go against armed men and ran away from the scene. Years later, I still felt that I was right. How could mere civilians go against a fully trained army, regardless of how just their cause was? Frank turned away, lost in his own thoughts. That's enough for today. It's okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you about it. I know I don't understand how easy my life is sometimes. One more thing, though. I know you joined the Young Swords back then. Do you mind if I ask why? Well, Now, if I was talking to any politician, I would probably say this, those damn communists. But to my son, I'll just say I had to survive somehow in the environment, and I made a choice. Frank raised his eyebrows, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance to go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problems are nothing compared to what you went through. I'm here to listen to them, no matter what they are. Before Frank could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Dana and Monica's voices and the sounds of rustling shopping bags filled the house. Alright, I'll be upstairs until dinner. Frank went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and the now setting sun. I hoped that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted. But I had the same nightmares again that night. Oof. Heavy stuff. Heavy stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and read these reports so that way in the next episode we can just go ahead and start up with decisions. So, read the report from Holsword, L1 report from Underhall. Underhall Construction's project manager for the L1 Railway has reported that the work has been going well, and they have already started laying down the foundations of the ground retaining walls, bridges, and tracks. Project supervisors from the government confirmed the report, saying that most of the preliminary work has already been done by Underhall, and everything was going according to schedule. Okay, nice. Like that. Love progress. USP report on reforms. Many members of the USP, led by Alvin Cleveland and the reformist wing of the party, clarified their demands from the government and the party Congress. For the upcoming constitutional reform, Alvin Cleveland stated that without minister reforms, they won't be able to stand behind the new reform package. Well, don't worry, there's not going to be a reform package. You will get a boot, though. Let me see. Morna industrial output concerns. The mayor of Morna has reported that the industrial output numbers this year are 12% lower than last year. They're requesting additional support to improve their industrial capacity, including machinery and personnel to combat the downward trend. With the construction of several new factories in Morna, the mayor stated his belief that an economic upturn in the city is still possible if the government investments succeed. According to the current projections, Morna is set to lose an additional 2% of industrial output next year. However, according to the local report from the municipality, an investment worth several billions of Swedish rand will stop the downward trend and increase the industrial output in a short amount of time. Okay. Prisoners riot in Antell Rock Prison. Yesterday around 11 a.m., a prison riot started in Ward C of the Antell Rock Prison, which was eventually suppressed. Ward C is generally used for keeping political prisoners, and the riot started when a warden was killed by a brutish political prisoner. 4 guards and 21 prisoners died. 134 injured. Jesus Christ. Okay, I have the presidential visit to Narble. We've done all of that. What news articles do we have? Attacker opened fire on protesters. 17 dead. A man opened fire in Visort City Center during a protest march organized by the Communist Party of Swordsland against the murder of Bernard Sarkis. The attacker used a military-grade machine gun dated 1929, which is suspected to be part of the inventory of the Swedish armed forces. The attacker killed himself right after the shooting of 25 people, killing 16. He took out the weapon from the newsstand at the square, brandished it, and yelled, "Come, I will give you freedom," one witness said. The highly charged word freedom was previously associated with Bludish separatists, but has been used widely during the previous month of protests against the murder of Bernard Sarkis. Minister of the Interior Lilias Graf said that she had spoken to the chief of Visor City Police and asked him to take strict action. The government will not tolerate any such incident, and the perpetrators will not be spared, she said. Guilford FC and Enrica FC derby postponed due to protests. One of the most anticipated matches between Guilford and Enrica was postponed because of the intense protests in the city of Enrica. The league has issued the following statement regarding the situation. Due to safety reasons, the players are compromised during this time of trouble. We have decided to postpone the game. Moreover, we stand in solidarity with the fans, our players, and the people of Enrica in the fight against injustice. Mayor Curtain Les has also made a statement. It is a tragic day of Swordsland where the president himself refused to act in the face of communism. It is said that inaction breeds doubt and fear. Thus I fear the spread of communism has sown deeper inside the heart of the nation than we thought. However, I and the people of Enrica will never stop fighting for the soul of our great country. Thank you, jerk. Oh, don't worry, I'm working on a lot of stuff. You're probably going to end up arrested too. Undemocratic elections of Swordsland. Swordsland has an electoral threshold of 10%. This means any political parties that are under 10% of the vote can't even enter the assembly. This is the very reason why the United Swordsland Party holds 52% of the seats in the assembly today. It is also the reason why the largest ethnic minority of Swordsland to be non-existent. It is also the reason why the largest ethnic minority of Swordsland is non-existent in Swordish politics. The last elections have shown that the pro-Bludish WPB had an enormous voter base of just above 9%, but it still failed to meet the 10% threshold and couldn't enter politics. Similarly, the CPS has won around 8% of the general vote but was eliminated. This means that millions of votes are not represented in our current government. Moreover, this has benefited the USP and the most and gave them the lawmaking power. The undemocratic threshold needs to be lowered down so that our true representation in the assembly and the true representation of our voices. No one can call Swordsland a democracy without a decrease, or a constitutional proposal that does not include such changes democratic. Alrighty, so in the next episode we will be tackling a presidential visit to Narble. I don't remember that. I don't think there is. I think that's where we start talking about education and such, but we'll see in the next episode. So if you like the video, like the video. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. I have plenty of stuff in the library of things that I have on my channel, and I have more stuff to come. So thank you for watching. See ya.